When I was a child, a man would call my home and directly ask for me. I was about 10. My parents would pick up another phone and listen in. He would breathe heavily and ask me weird questions that were not sexual in nature. This happened for months randomly. I did cheerleading for a children's league, and at our competition, I had to use the restroom. They would send us together in groups of 3. On the way to the bathroom, you had to go outside along a large building where there was a payphone. My team was up next, and the other 2 girls I was sent with were not on my team and were taking a long time. I told them I was going to head back into the gym on my own. As I neared the payphone, 2 young men were standing there next to it. As I got closer, it rang, and one man answered. He looked directly at me and said my name. "It's for you." Okay. I was like, nope, and ran as fast as I could into the gym and told my instructor. She went with me back to the phone, and of course they were gone. The creepy calls to my home stopped after this. To this day, I still wonder if it was the man who called the phone, and if those 2 young men were all linked. It's just creepy and weird. This was pre-internet days. I love riding my bike along country roads. Not far from where I live is a tiny town called 3 Oaks in Michigan. One Saturday, my wife was working and I had nothing to do, so I strapped my bike to my car and drove the hour to 3 Oaks. I parked in the scenic downtown area and then rode out of the town into the surrounding countryside. As I wound my way further into the remote countryside, houses and businesses and cars grew increasingly scarce. Eventually, there were only an occasional house or 2 every half mile or mile, and cornfields and small woods flanking the dirt and gravel roads that I pedaled down. It's one of those back roads that a minivan drove past me. Within moments of it passing, it turned around, pulled up alongside me. I looked over, and the passenger, a woman in her mid to late 20s, was looking at me with her window down. The driver, a man of seemingly the same age, leaned over the passenger and said to me in a slight southern drawl and a big smile on his face, "Hey, do you know David Christ?" I thought for a brief second, but I don't know any David Christ. I said no. The driver said, "You don't know of him at all?" I said that I didn't, and I apologized, and then pedaled on. The van sat for a moment longer, and then pulled a U-turn and drove off in the direction in which it originally was heading. I thought nothing of the encounter. Maybe the driver was a friend of David Christ, and he thought we had met through David or something. I don't know. At the time, I didn't think I had any reason to worry. I continued my ride, turning down this road and heading north, and then turning down that road and heading east. I didn't have any agenda. I was just out to enjoy the summer day and meander through the relaxing countryside. About 10 minutes later, and on an entirely new road, and heading in an entirely different direction from the one I had first met the van, I saw the van again. We were headed towards each other, and I gave a smile and a nod as I passed the driver. I remember thinking it was an odd coincidence that I should come across this van again. The driver stared as he passed, and he had a big smile on his face. At this point, I began wondering what they were doing. They might be lost and looking for this David Christ guy, or maybe they were just enjoying a scenic drive and thought I looked like a friend of a friend or something. I did not know, but at that point, I was starting to think about the situation a little more critically. I continued taking a twisting, turning, meandering path, taking this road, and then turning onto that, heading north, south, west, east. Then I came across the van again. Again, they were headed in my direction, and I pulled alongside them. The driver rolled down his window and leaned out. He was a late-20s man with a few inches of a goatee and a baseball cap. He had a large smile plastered across his face again. I stopped my bike and looked at him, waiting for him to say something, and he just looked at me for a good 30 seconds. Now, 30 seconds doesn't sound like a long time, but you go flag down a stranger and then just look at them for 30 seconds and you'll realize in that kind of situation 30 seconds is a lifetime. Finally he spoke and said, "Hey, do you know David Christ?" Same damn question. This time there was no smile on his face. He stared at me, and I was thinking to myself, is he joking? Does he really not remember he asked me this same question 20 minutes ago? Is he just being funny? Is he high as hell? After a moment, I told him that I still do not know anyone by the name of David Christ, and I pedaled off down the road. It's at that time that I realized exactly in how remote of an area I was. I peered down the road I was on, and I didn't see a house on its entire length. I was flanked by a cornfield on one side and a forest on the other. I looked over my shoulder and I saw the van slowly driving down the road away from me. It couldn't be a coincidence that I came across this van 3 times now, not with me taking random roads, heading different directions. It made no sense why anyone driving would take that same maze of roads. The only thing they could have been doing was just driving around, maybe a pleasure drive. But why would they stop me and ask the same question twice? It was quite strange, and I was beginning to become a little concerned. I decided to begin to head back toward the town center. I pedaled hard, and the gravel road ahead of me continued with a bend to the right and a dirt path, for it couldn't really be called a road to the left. As I neared the fork, who would come around the bend but the damn van? I gripped my pocket knife, which I always take with me on rides like this, just in case, and then realized all they would have to do is run me down with the van, and I would be in serious trouble. As the van drew closer, I was ready to jump off and run into the cornfields. The van slowed down as it approached me, and the driver rolled down his window and leaned out again. But this time I did not stop riding. I increased my speed, even though I knew I could never outrun the van if they gave chase. I looked over my shoulder and saw the van sitting in the middle of the road. I took the right fork and continued on the gravel road until I could no longer see the van behind the corn rows, and then I stopped. I got off of my bike and crept along the cornfield until I was at its edge, and I peeked down the road I had just been down. The van was in the distance driving away from me. I ran back to my bike, and then as soon as the van was entirely out of sight, I turned around, took the left fork along the dirt path. I rode as fast as I could, knowing that if the people in the van had nefarious things in mind, and if they had caught me on this dirt path flanked by cornfields and far from an area that anyone would come up to, that would be the best time to attack me. My ruse worked, or perhaps the van was never after me at all, and I made it the rest of the way to the town center without seeing them again. When I got home later that day, I was still replaying the events in my head, and the name David Christ kept creeping through my mind. Was David Christ someone famous? I wondered. Like a musician. Should I have known David Christ? I decided to Google the name. I tried a couple of different spellings for Christ. I tried with a K and with a C. Spelling with the C in the name revealed a terrifying result. I came across a newspaper article from Knoxville, Tennessee. The article explained how a man named David Christ had turned himself in after stabbing another man at a gas station in 2013. The article included a photo of this criminal David Christ, and I believe it was the same man that was driving the van. Add a baseball cap and a few inches of a goatee, and the man in the van was a dead ringer for David Christ in the article. I did an inmate search of the Knox County prison, and there was no David Christ in the inmate population. Somehow David Christ had gotten out of prison, or maybe he was never convicted, as I couldn't find any articles about sentencing. In less than 2 years after stabbing a guy, and for some reason he had made his way to Michigan. Why was he driving along these back roads? Who was the woman in the passenger seat? And why the hell did he keep asking if I knew of him? Do I know David Christ? Yes, I do now. I was a chaperone for a Girl Scout camping trip when I was 16. The kids were about 5 to 9 years old. I had a cabin with 6 kids I was in charge of at night and helped out during the day. Night one of my kids had a bit of a developmental issue. I wake up to her leaving the cabin. I chase after her, thinking she is going to the latrine, but she's sleepwalking. I'm out in the dark, barefoot, trying to coax this creepy kid back inside when I hear something big out in the woods. I grab the kid and she starts screaming like an infant and goes stiff. I carry her back inside. Everyone in my cabin is awake. I don't sleep the rest of the night. Day 2, Sleepwalker is moved to another cabin. That afternoon, when I'm walking the kids back from the latrine, Sleepwalker and another kid sneak away from the group. I realize they are gone, get help, find kids. 15 minutes later, back at the camp, they start telling scary stories about their sneaking away, saying it was the kitty cow who lives in the woods. Night 2, wake up and it's getting cold. Get up to close the windows and shutters and see a light in the woods, like someone has a lantern. It walks to a point in the woods, then stops. I stay still in the dark and watch it for a long while, about to shrug it off, when the light moves again, coming around and going down the side of the cabin, closer, but not close enough to see who is carrying it. I realize it's heading to the window by the kids' bunk beds, sneak over and close the window and shutters. The light stays close on the other side of the shutters for a long time before moving on and disappearing. Day 3, tell adults about the lights. They dismiss it as probably a ranger checking the campsite. Kids by this time are totally freaking each other out over kitty cow, literally starting to be afraid to leave the craft area in broad daylight because kitty cow might be there. There's all sorts of weird kitty cow stories. That afternoon, we find out a bear broke into another camp and ate food. So in addition to a real threat, we think that might be the origin of kitty cow. Plus, it would make sense that there would be rangers out looking, as there's a bear on the loose. Night 3, I stay up listening to music to see if the lights will come back about 1 a.m. I see it coming by again walking to a point in the woods and waiting. Around 1:30 it starts closer to the cabin. As it's walking around the side, I hear one of the other chaperones start to yell, "Hey, who is that? Who's out there?" The lights cut off. I yell back to the chaperone that I saw it too. What should we do? I'm terrified at this point. The chaperone tells me to bring my kids over to her. Holding hands, we all cram into one cabin, and a bit later a thunderstorm starts. For another night, I basically don't sleep. The next day, everyone sort of laughs it off again, sort of saying we weren't seeing anything, that maybe it was heat lightning, or the kids were playing with flashlights and we saw them reflected. I'm so sleep deprived it hurts, and I'm hearing popping noises. I end up being paired with another chaperone and we go for a hike with the kids. It's all foggy in the woods and the kids are really strung out between the excitement the night before, which they blame on Kitty Cow. Out in the woods, the kids start claiming they are seeing Kitty Cow everywhere, sneaking up on us. I can't tell you now how weird and terrifying things got then. You had this Silent Hill fog, all the girls are wearing matching ponchos, so the scene was surreal. The kids were freaking out over every tree, screaming Kitty Cow is coming to get them, and I'm barely held together on no sleep to convince myself that some weirdo has been creeping around our camp. Things literally devolve into mass hysteria. The kids are literally falling to the ground, screaming and sobbing, and the other chaperone leaves. She just books it out of the forest back to the camp while I'm coaxing, pulling, and carrying screaming children out of the mist. I got the kids almost back to the camp when the other chaperones come rushing out. The chaperone who left claimed she saw a bear and ran for her life. I did not leave any kids behind. I have never and will never experience anything as creepy and terrifying as that afternoon in the woods. While nothing happened, it haunted my dreams since then. If you are new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing.